Hi, Todd. How are you?
I'm great, Lisa. How are you doing this morning?
Good. Welcome, everybody, to the neural alignment model. And this is video number 4 in the 4-part series of hover parenting and the costs and how to rewire your brain out of it. So in the last video, video number 3, we talk about the cost of hover parenting and how it creates enabled children who act entitled, and how we enable our children, and why we do hover parenting. So please check out video number 3 in this series, and video number 1, 2, and 3 is now up on YouTube, as well in our Facebook group, the Neural Alignment Model Facebook group. So today we are going to go into a little bit of backstory from video number 3, and then we're going to talk about triggers, muting triggers, and we're also going to talk about how to rewire your brain out of this hover parenting addiction. So Todd, we were talking about the scale and the neural alignment model scale and how people overreact to certain situations. Can you talk about that in terms of overreacting in terms of a hover parenting as if it was back in ancient times in a hunter-gatherer tribe?
Yeah, you can imagine that, you go back thousands and thousands of years when we were hunter-gatherers on the plains of Africa, or anywhere, Europe, for that matter. And how well we communicated really mattered. We talked about how children used to have 8 different cries, and the mother could automatically read each distinctive cry and then respond appropriately. Well, our communication was critical. Nonverbal communication was critical. And so if, for example, you had a parent that was reacting at an intense level, super concerned about their kid's safety in some particular area, for a parent to do that, typically the rest of the band would be thinking, oh God, there's a predator. There's something hunting us there. And so there would be this, call to action. There would be this massive response. And it's almost a little bit like, if you could hypothesize or conceptualize this idea of the boy who cried wolf, but actually literally cried it in a hunter-gatherer scenario. So acts in a way like, ah! And it's the type of scream driven by fear. It's the type of response driven by fear, not hunger, not sadness, not whatever else these other cries for, but this way of communicating. And so what's the danger of that? Well, we learned the lesson in The Boy Who Cried Wolf. The danger is that at some point, as you continue to act in this way, people get conditioned to it. They get desensitized to it. And all of a sudden, here comes a real wolf or a lion, and no response. People don't just so to have people not trust the accuracy of your emotional response as a hunter-gatherer would have actually greatly increased the probability of some sort of a disaster happening. Mm-hmm. So now you flash forward to today. And one of the most important things to do, especially when you're trying to help temper or gauge or moderate appropriate behavioral reactions or responses. And there's this kind of crazy thing that, well, just a child's feeling what they're feeling and let them feel it. It's actually not really true. Children generally in a modern culture are so disconnected from their authentic emotions already that in many cases what they're feeling is an addictive feeling. Mm-hmm. is a hyper-reactive response to something, is a way of manipulating so that they can get their own way.
Exactly. I mean, I can give you a really quick interjection here. My daughter, as I've said before, has anxiety that, Todd is helping me work with her on. And, she'll get a paper cut, and the scream she lets out, I swear to God, there would be an arm laying on the ground, and I go whipping out of wherever I am, and I'm like, what's wrong? Where's the blood? Where's the dismembered lamb? And so, yeah, her response is completely out of whack on the scale.
Yeah.
Bumping her arm on something.
Well, and what parents have resorted to today is it's almost like this common awareness. So if my kid's an overreactor and they fall down or this or that, and they go into this big screaming, crying, or they paper cut or whatever it might be, we don't really, parents freak out. They run to oh my God, baby, oh, poor baby, but we also know there's a deeper level. It's when our kids fall down, hit their head, fall down and hurt themselves and it's real and it's really bad and now they're injured, we've actually resorted to this delayed response. When a baby falls now or a child falls now and it's like, bam, you hear their head hit something and there's no cry. Now we're really freaked out because there's that shock piece that the baby's dealing with. It's like, ah! It's like, that's real. That's real. So it's something, again, really today that we've just lost this ability to communicate on a clear level that starts back with, not being able to read their cries. And to the degree that we can't respond to their cries is the degree that we're already activating the stress response.
That's right.
Oh, you can't understand me. Oh boy, what if there is danger? And so then they start to exaggerate everything. And so the scale is really helpful because it helps us navigate and communicate. Like nurses are good at this. You go to the hospital and they'll go, okay, so what's your pain right now? If we're going to do pain management, 1 being this, 10 being that, and 5 being this, or where would you put yourself? Oh, I'm somewhere around a 6, I guess. Okay, so that's an appropriate understanding that I can offer an appropriate response to.
Yes.
Right? So the scale is something I recommend that every parent uses. And this is a way that now we can actually reconnect our communication ability. So that can be used for sadness, that can be used for any emotion, but that can also be used for physical things. How does that make you feel? Or when you see an inappropriate response and it's just over the top, you can say, sweetie, you have every right that when you spill cereal on the floor to be a little upset. It makes sense. But right now you're screaming and throwing a tantrum like your dog died. Now, dog dying, that's a 10 out of 10. You get to scream and act like this and throw a fit and feel powerful emotions when something really bad like that happens. But dropping your Cheerios on the floor, well, mommy just cleans that up or daddy just cleans that up. And then we get you more Cheerios.
And so I think it's really helpful for parents to also put themselves on the scale. They react. Because I've done that too and gone, did I really need to react that way? I was that reaction. And over the last, 2 years of working with Todd, I can tell you my response scale has gone way down.
Yeah.
I mean, I was trained to overreact by my mom.
Right.
Everything was an overreaction. You drop cookies and oh my God, the world ended, right? Everything was a reaction.
Yeah. No, it's such a good idea, Lisa. Yeah. Put yourself, and also to me, it's about creating a language, because if we're going to improve our communication, what tools do we use to do that? And if our emotions aren't that in balance yet, what language can we adopt that helps us communicate in a way? So the skill becomes a part of the language.
Yeah.
And so you start to use it. And by the way, then your kids can also go, well, Dad, that really should have been a 4, but you got really angry, like an 8 or a 10.
My girls do that to me. Like, Mom, did you really need to get that upset? No, you know what? You're right. I overreacted. And it's checks and balances, but I don't take offense to it.
So this is a deeper version of truth, right? When you can moderate and actually navigate and guide the intensity of an appropriate emotional response, it actually connects it to your body. It actually allows you to readjust your emotions. It gives you emotional mastery. This isn't about muting or stuffing down your emotions. This isn't about pretending not to feel something you feel. This is just about using your rational brain to somehow temper or modify the response so that it becomes relatively appropriate. It doesn't have to be perfect because every person's different.
Yeah.
But it gives you some sort of a measuring device that you can at least be in the ballpark.
Yeah.
And so this is just one way of muting a trigger, is that you adopt a device or adopt a mechanism that allows you to tell truth at a deeper level. And the best way to mute any trigger is to get better at telling the truth. So adopting a language where, if we could get past the stigma of the word addiction, where it seems like it's a pejorative or some sort of a judgment or this negative stigma attached to it, boy, that would make things a lot easier, because to incorporate addiction into your language is another way of muting these triggers, to be able to say, oh, this is the pattern of the emotions that you're addicted to, and I'm addicted to these emotions. And so these are the areas that my addictive emotions have me overreact. These are the areas where I actually start to draw things into my life so that I can feel these emotions. Or these are the areas where I run things through this filter, this paradigm, and I've got these blinders on and I can only kind of see these particular experiences in a way where I'll respond emotionally in the same way over and over and over.
Yeah.
So those ways can help.
So we had talked about 4 triggers that may come up for hover parents, and these are just general triggers that a lot of people have. So one of them was, you see your child attempting to do something that you consider to be dangerous or that causes you fear. Not the child fear, but you fear, which can trigger helicopter parenting or hover parenting. When the child is not doing or as well as you think they should in school, sports, or art. Another one was seeing other parents hover parenting can trigger a hover parenting response. Like you're not doing enough for your child or you're not fitting in with the group. And then so we're going to talk a little bit later about modeling and compensating. So you had a story that you wanted to tell everybody about triggers and hover parenting.
Yeah, this was really an important takeaway for me because I'd already been teaching parenting and I'd done seminars on it. And I guess, running things through the filter of my model. And of course I had, was raising my own 3 children. And I really thought I had this thing down. And it was fascinating. So Stacy and I went on a trip to Tulum, Mexico. And we were down staying in these cabanas on the beach, these, it was like $40 a night for these bamboo cabanas on the beach with floating beds and hanging from the ceiling and mosquito nets, but no bathroom, and the lights went out at like 8 o'clock at night or something like that. There was no electricity and we loved it. Stacy made these luminarios, filled white paper bags with sand on the bottom and put candles in about 30 of these and lit up our room. And it was just so amazing and so romantic. And well, in this part of Mexico, this is where the Mayan civilization used to be. And so there's still a lot of Mayan Indians there. And they're these beautiful little peaceful people, and they're short, and they kind of have a Dalai Lama-esque kind of smile on all the time. And so Stacy and I get up one morning, and the fellow that's cooking our breakfast is a Mayan Indian. And so we go out onto the beach. There's this little deck, and so they have maybe 5 tables out there on the little deck, not a lot. And then up these stairs is the fella cooking our meal. But then for the first time, over to my right, there's this little Mayan mother with her baby, and she's rocking back and forth in this hammock. And so after we've been there for a bit and we're talking, and she's so peaceful, and so she puts her baby down, and the baby's just kind of crawling around the tables, walking actually at this point. And he goes to these big jagged steps like he's going to go up and see his dad who's cooking our meal. And they're big jagged steps. So Mr. Parenting Teacher guy, I'm like, well, I'm really good at predicting outcomes, And this actually leads to so many potential issues around energetic exchange and fear, and how that might, not just your own kids, but might affect anybody that you're in the vicinity of. Me feeling afraid, could that trigger a stress response in somebody else, even indirectly? They don't even know I'm afraid. They're just picking up on that energy. So that I don't know about for sure. But anyways, so this little guy goes up to the first step, and he's going to start climbing this step, and it's half the size of his body. And they're jagged, cut out, sort of smashed rocks. It's not a smooth staircase. And so he starts climbing the step, and I'm like, oh God, and he gets to the second step. I'm like, Stacy, can you believe this mother? I'm like, she's not going to go and get her kid. And I'm like, this kid's going to fall down and hurt himself. Because in my infinite wisdom, of course, I know all of these things are going to happen. My premonition as a super parent. And of course, well, what happens? The baby falls down and falls down a flight of stairs, not the flight, but a step, and starts crying. And so I almost get out of my seat. It's like, oh God, these are jagged stairs. And I'm gonna get out of my seat, and I'm wondering, am I doing this as a message to her? Am I compensating? Because damn it, you're really relaxed in that hammock, just sort of floating back and forth, just rocking in your hammock. And do you want me to get your kid for you? And I'm doing that sort of move that we in the Western world have perfected.
Perfected.
Oh, the baby's going to get, oh, the baby. Honey, watch the baby. This amazing, and it's not like we're always going to get up and do it. Sometimes we're doing this to send a message to the spouse that's closer to the kid. You know? So I keep sending this message, and the baby's crying. Good, crying good. But still, it's what I would call an owie, not an injury. And the mom is so relaxed. Now, if I'm being honest, she hasn't taken her eyes off her child.
Yeah.
She is vigilant, wide awake, totally focused, and calm. Calm and aware. And I started cluing in a little bit. Now, I'm still thinking, come on. So she waits. Now she does this with her hand, this funny thing with her hand. I'll never forget it. This is like, I don't know, 10, 11, 12 years ago. And she does this thing with her hand, and she goes, almost like you would call on a dog, almost like you're calling on a pet. But she was calling her little baby over. She's like, and so the baby just, and he's crying still, and he's walking all kind of goofy like little babies do. And by the way, this baby was teeny, and it could walk. You wouldn't expect that, but there were such smaller people. So baby walks all the way back to his mama. She picks the baby up. She kisses some part of his leg or knee or whatever. Once, not over coddles him, just kisses him once, puts him back down. And you can tell, after the fact, I guess you could tell, just pats him on his bum and points him in the direction of the stairs. And I'm thinking, and the baby starts to waddle back to the staircase. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, lady. Did you not just see what I had already predicted come true? You want this child to really hurt himself? And the baby climbed every step, got to the 5th, walked in and saw his papa with this. And I was like, oh, my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
I get it at a deeper level.
Yeah.
She knew that staircase, that little kid is so close to the ground. It's not like he was going to roll down all 5 sets of stairs. He just, a little plop, a little owie. And she set him up for resilience. She acted like a hunter-gatherer mother. This is super important.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they were available all the time. Yes, they were present. Yes, they looked after every need. Yes, they just did it in a way that they weren't terrified.
Yes.
They were sending the message of, you're okay.
Yeah.
We fall down and we stub our toe and we get hurt. That's normal. You're a hunter-gatherer. So you're going to have a lot of fall downs. Yeah. And you're okay. Come on back. Yeah. And I'll give you a little kiss. And now go do it right. Yeah. Go succeed. Go succeed. So to me, it's a really good story for me getting the message at a deeper level. This is parenting 101. It's the simplest and it's the hardest for parents to do in this culture.
Absolutely. Oh, it absolutely is. Because just a couple of days ago, we were on the Puntledge River, and there was a guy who was quite a ways away from us who had this little kind of farty fat dog. And he was throwing balls into the river, and the current was really strong. And there was a set of rapids right by where we were sitting. And he throws it just too far out. And I saw the dog grab it, and I saw him start to go down the river. And I'm up out of my seat, and I started to go because I'm a good swimmer, to go into the rapids to get this dog. And I look over at the guy. No response from him. He's just looking around. He looks at his dog. He was like, it's fine. And I watched this dog go down the rapids, and I'm physically restraining myself from jumping in and saving this dog. The dog goes over, runs back, goes right back to his owner, throw it again. And I sat myself down. Yeah, and I was like, oh, okay, maybe this dog is used to doing it. And then another guy comes throws his stick into the rapids for the dog. Dog goes down the rapids because he likes to.
Right. Yeah. He's doggy river rafting. Yeah.
Yeah, and he does it all the time. The guy's like, oh, this is his favorite thing to do.
Right.
And I'm like,
Great.
He's like, if I don't throw the stick, he'll go in anyway.
Right.
He'll just surf down the river. And I was like, oh, look at me getting all upset for no good reason.
Yeah. You see, this is just another version of telling the truth, right? And what I love about it is the truth will set you free. So if we're open, if we're allowing ourselves to challenge ourselves consistently, if we're not dogmatically fixed on a way that it must be because my culture or my family or my religion teaches, if we can just be open to allow ourselves to accept a deeper level of truth and challenge some of our beliefs, that already can sort of dial things down, the intensity of life in sort of every way. I'm not so affixed to things having to be a certain way. My kids don't have to turn out exactly the way that I want them to. They don't have to be a doctor when they grow up. They don't have to be like, I mean, obviously we see all the cliches, right? I mean, our kids aren't ours.
Yeah.
We're just their guide. We don't own our children. It's not our life. It's their life. Don't live vicariously through your children.
Well, and don't create fear around everything. That's what Western society is so good at.
Yeah.
The fear. I was talking to my cousin about this because when I was young, like 6, 7 years old, I walked to and from school by myself. I went to the store by myself. I walked everywhere. That was just normal behavior in the 80s when I was a kid, and everybody. Right. And yet now I won't let my kids walk across the field to go to the park because something might happen. Now, there is a lot more things that happen, but I said to my husband, you know what? I need to stop this. I need to start letting them be more independent and going to the park with their friend and being there and making sure everything's okay because it is a public park, but not letting them have that opportunity to become more independent because my fear is just translating onto them.
That's right.
And it's okay to be vigilant and be aware, but not to be fearful.
Yeah, it's just the ultimate trap of every parent because it's easy to defend, but Todd, it's a dangerous world. Yeah. And I would rather overprotect my kids and make sure that they're safe by the time they leave the house than not being able to live with myself if I wasn't on top of everything that they're doing and something bad happened to my kid and I could have prevented it.
Yeah.
I get that. I'm a loving father, right, of 3 beautiful children. I get the tendency or the inclination to want to make sure that they never get hurt. You just got to get the bigger picture. You are hamstringing them. You are disabling them. You are guaranteeing that they will get hurt again and again and again in life, and not only not have the skills to deal with it, but not have the emotional experience of thinking that they can. And so living in fear and creating a prison in their life of not really living. Yeah. And so for me, I would rather my child have that balance of having these experiences, knowing that they're going to be fine, having that confidence. My son, Mackenzie, was busing around Vancouver, all over the place to different skate parks. I mean, hour-long bus rides away. Yeah. At the age of 13. Yeah. And other parents are like, what? You let your child bus alone at 13? You don't get it. He's the most confident kid in the world. There's nothing that scares this kid now. Yeah. What's the probability of something bad really happening? It's really, really remote. And I feel sorry for any parent that kind of just lets go, relaxes a little bit, and then something bad does happen. I know that's tough, and you probably feel guilt about that. But the alternative is 100 times worse. Mm-hmm. Do you want your child to live in the prison of fear for their entire life? And when I
have a really good little story around that because I was a hover parent. I definitely can put my hand up and say I was, because we go to the park and I'd be right beside them. And it wasn't just when they were 3 and 4, it was when they were 6 and 7. And, right beside them when they're climbing up a thing and be careful. And, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure? And then I was wondering why my daughter wouldn't go to school without her teachers having to rip her off of me literally
Right.
every day.
Yeah.
And I started to clue into my fear was translating into her, and I started to pull back. And at the park, I'd be 10 feet away. And, you know, at the, so at the park, I'd be 10 feet away and then 20 feet away. And now she's, you know, she'll, you know, if I'm a little concerned about something, I'll be like, hey, you know, my little one is hanging from 10-foot high pole. You doing okay? Oh, yeah, Mom, I'm good. All right. Okay, great. And then I just go back to visiting with my friend. I'm still watching her, but I'm not projecting fear of what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Never fallen. The little one has never, ever fallen.
Mm-hmm.
The oldest one now can go off and play at a playground, and they can go to the park with their friend, and she can actually go walk somewhere without me, and she can do things without me now because I've given her the confidence to be independent, where when I was hovering, there was absolutely no independence to the point where she had separation anxiety.
Well, what's so interesting about what you're talking about, you know, climbing trees and climbing fences and all of these things that children do.
Yeah.
Well, and I hope this doesn't sound sexist, but more so little boys do. I mean, you get tomboys that do it too, but more so little boys. They're climbing, they're fighting, they're rolling, they're wrestling. Well, one of the things that they're actually learning to do is fall. They're learning to fall. And they get really good at falling. My son, because he's a skateboarder, and skateboarders have a real special ability. I mean, you know, whether you're in judo or football or any of these things, you learn how to fall. Biking, you learn how to fall off your bike. Now women do a lot more of this, but if you ride horses, you learn how to fall off a horse. One of the most important things you can do in the environment that you're in is learn how to fall down in that environment. And actually minimize the probability of some sort of an injury. These skateboarders, it's remarkable. I mean, when you're learning to skateboard, you probably fall 20 times, 30 times, 40 times a day. On a rolling board. Like, you better learn how to fall. Now his body is just covered in scars of really intense falls where he just tore off the skin. But he's only broken one bone. He's been skateboarding since he was 7 years old. He's 24 and he's broken one bone and he's got a bunch of scrapes. That kid, man, like I have no worries about that guy in any sort of physical type of a scenario, because if he falls, he's going to be fine. You know? So.
Exactly. So those were really, really good examples, because it just shows how our fear projects forward and actually hamstrings the children. They're not resilient in life. And you can take it forward into, they have a job and they have a project that fails, and it maybe not even be their fault. Maybe somebody else dropped the ball, but resiliency there. They don't know how to get up from that fall. And you just totally have a meltdown. Overreaction, huge overreaction. But if you have a room full of them while we're hover parented, huge overreactions, there's not going to be anything productive that comes out of that. They're not going to have the resiliency to overcome any types of bumps or setbacks. And so that's why we're trying to say hover parenting needs to end. It needs to stop, because we're hurting our society.
Yeah, well, and here's the thing, right, is that it starts to create a dynamic. And this is the thing I think people aren't that attuned to, but it doesn't just create a dynamic between the parent and the child. So first of all, you hover parented, you overprotected, you overreact, you are fearful. And so your child starts to adopt that fear. And then, well, what starts to happen is your child overreacts. They get hurt, they freak out. They're doing 10 out of 10. Which then triggers your hover parenting and reinforces why you should hover parent in the first place. What happens is you both really kind of get in this trap, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You believe it's dangerous. They start to act in a way like it's dangerous. Then more bad things happen to them. Life actually becomes dangerous. And then you have more evidence for why you need to overprotect them. But then it doesn't just happen with you as a parent. So now you've got this vulnerable kid who somehow attracts drama, chaos, accidents, accident proneness, whatever into their life. And now teachers are having to focus more on them and reflecting back their necessity, their needs, their lack of resilience, And the whole world now starts to reflect back and become a part of the dynamic in that reflection, reinforcing the belief that now the kid is adopted.
Yeah.
And so the world isn't astute enough to recognize, well, that's not true. Some people are. Again, some people like, all of a sudden the football coach goes, all right, Bob, listen, get up, you'll be fine. Dust your shoes off. Whereas that old tough love type of thing, it's like, here's the funny thing that happens in families though. Maybe the mother's tougher on the child and the father's really overprotective, or vice versa. What actually ends up happening is the parents start to get in this tug of war because mom is inherently seeing that dad is overprotecting the child and not letting him or her learn through experience. And dad's being really fearful and really protective. And he thinks that's good fathering. Mm-hmm. And so mom starts to tug on this thing over here a little bit because she's trying to compensate and pull dad this way more to a balanced perspective so that he's not overparenting. She feels it. She knows it. Now she starts to change her behavior. And from dad's perspective, she's way over here, really not paying attention, really not looking after their little Bobby. And so dad starts to actually compensate for her and become more vigilant and more hover parenting. Now she starts to see him losing his crap. This dad is really losing it. And so she starts to get tough on the kid. And she actually, in a way, almost creates this necessity to almost set him up for failure, set him up so that he'll experience pain. And now dad sees her doing this and he gets angry at mom. It's like, you're setting him up. And all of a sudden, you actually have conflict between mom and dad. Mm-hmm. This can actually happen with parenting. Now we're on different pages now. I thought when we got married, we were talking about things and we were really close. And these dynamics build over time. And then you have these completely different stances. Now the child starts to play on this dynamic between the parent.
Yep.
Starts to play role of victim, starts to overreact on purpose as a way to get payoffs, and mom and dad fighting and flocking to him and it becoming about him.
Yep.
So the dynamic becomes a prison. It actually takes on a life of its own. Even when you want to break the dynamic, you become clear of it. The dynamic itself has almost like a life.
Yes.
It's an entity unto itself.
It takes on its own addiction persona.
It does.
Drives fear and thoughts and beliefs. And
that's right.
We can tie that into, so you don't see your child doing well in school or sports or art, and you're living through your child, and you're projecting fear onto them. And so you are, as a hover parent, going, wow, if my kid got like 50 in math, or, as they do in reporting in Canada now, they're below expectation. Mm-hmm. You believe that you failed as a parent, because we talked about that, right? The underlying fear is failure. As a parent. And seeing other parents hover parenting triggers you to go, well, I'm obviously not doing enough. Like I see this person being hyper vigilant and, oh, I need to be more vigilant. But then as you're talking about there's the model of compensation, right? So I know for me, sometimes if I'm over at someone's house, and because my blood sugar drops quite a bit, and so does my daughter's, we're always having a few snacks because I can feel my blood sugar drop. And so I'm vigilantly aware of kids needing to eat. They're walking out in the yard and they come in and they're super hungry. And I always, would you like a snack, right? And I've been to other people's houses that they don't have blood sugar drops.
Right.
And there's no food. Like whole day. Right. And so I'm always actually bringing snacks with me to places. And I'm like, okay, number one, I'm doing it because of my child. But then the other children, oh, thank you. Yeah, we never get enough to eat. Like we're always hungry. Thanks for the snack. Mm-hmm. And so then that triggers a hover parenting response as well. Even though you're doing it for a good reason, you have to be really aware of what you're doing and not be like constantly overcompensating. But in some situations, like you still have to do what's right. I mean, I'm still going to feed the kids, but I have to know why I'm doing it, not just a subconscious reaction.
Yeah. It's such a good point, Lisa. It's one of the biggest mistakes that I think parents make is it's not just parents related to kids, it's people. One of the biggest mistakes I think people make is that, and we're doing a little bit of it right now. We're telling a story, and that story is anecdotal evidence for something that is right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we do that inherently.
Yep.
So I went through a trauma, or I went through a painful situation in my childhood, and because I learned this and I responded this way and it did this to me, well, that must mean that it applies to you in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just not true. It's one of the biggest mistakes we make. We assume that our experience must be your experience if you're going through something similar. And so then we make assumptions about what you're experiencing and what might help you.
Right.
In certain scenarios, I guess that's okay, but it's one of the biggest mistakes, especially when I'm training new clinicians and they automatically jump to some sort of a conclusion because of their own personal experience or somebody that they just worked with. That's just one example of how that thing can manifest.
Yes.
And so I want to give an example of that, because we don't always just pass fear down to our kids. Yes, it's this, we're living vicariously through our children because we have this fear of failure. And so we drive our kids to 4 different things in a day, to dance class, to this thing, to that thing, because that's supposed to be good parenting today. And there's a part of us that knows it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous what I'm doing right now. I'm a taxi driver. I don't get to spend any time with my kid. But there's other ways of sort of passing fear on indirectly. And it's by putting pressure on your kid. Even really sophisticated, good parents don't know they're doing it. I'll give you an example. My daughter joined rugby in grade 9, I think, my eldest daughter. And she's real tough, but she'd never played any rugby. And so they put her at the number 8 spot, and I don't know what that is, what particular, they all have different names, like winger, ruck, this, that, whatever. And so she was number 8. And what they generally do is they're responsible for the number 8 on the other team. So if you're number 15, you're kind of more responsible for number 15 on the other team, typically, and you're on the same part of the field as well. And I remember, I wanted to cheer for her as I would go and watch her games. I wanted to be that supportive parent. I also knew not to be the guy that was screaming and yelling, come on, like over the top, because that's obnoxious. And I remember one time they were playing against another team, and the number 8 on the other squad was a monstrous girl. She was 6 feet tall. She had to be 160 pounds of muscle. And I'm like, oh, my poor baby. And so I was just trying to keep it quiet. I was trying to be chill, not going to hold any fear, but I'm like, woo, girl. And my daughter dove into a pile and just smashed that girl and tackled her on a play. And I got a tear. I'm not screaming or yelling, but I feel this tear. And there's just no way energetically that I'm not projecting the importance. Like, this is too important. If I'm that proud because you tackled somebody, I'm out of balance. Mm-hmm. There's no way that I can't project what that pride onto you that you interpret as how important it is to my dad, that doesn't start to feel like pressure. Mm-hmm. I want this to be your passion. Do it for your reasons, not because it makes your dad proud or it brings a tear to his eye. So now this doesn't look like I'm projecting fear down in a way, but again, when you go underneath, what is that emotion about? What is that really coming from? And it's still driven by fear. It's still driven by fear. That sense of pride still driven by fear. So we pass it down in a lot of different ways. And so if we're talking to you right now and we're saying fear, and you go, no, I don't feel any fear about it. Fear manifests itself in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it'll manifest as indifference. Sometimes it'll manifest as pride. There's a lot of different ways that it'll show up. But if you really have the ability to go underneath what the superficial feeling is, I think that you would be able to explore it. In many cases, maybe most cases, we'll find what's driving it as some sort of fear.
That's absolutely right. So we were talking about, and this leads in perfectly, in order to mute the trigger and to be able to rewire your brain out of this hover parenting, it's about finding the truth behind the story, finding the truth behind the emotion, finding the truth behind the behavior. And
yeah, I mean,
that in modern society, it's actually quite easy to find the truth if you're really willing to look for it.
Yeah, I mean, look at it. What a seemingly oversimplification of health and balance and healing. And you guys will hear me say this again and again and again. And I may have already given this analogy, but let me do it again, because to me, it's like one of the best ways of teaching is repetition. And so, and maybe recontextualizing when and where you present that piece of information. So I would tell people that the vast majority of the global population can only be in pain and suffering, especially chronic pain and chronic suffering, or repetitive patterns of pain and suffering, if something you believe is not true. If you're in a chronic pattern of pain, in almost all cases, you believe something that's false. And that false belief is the thing that's driving behaviors and interactions that's perpetuating the pain. If you have a pattern of painful situations or circumstances that are coming back to you again and again and again, something you believe is not true. So when we say that the best way to mute a trigger is truth, it seems simplistic. What a silly thing. I'm telling you that from the perspective of our model, we try and imbue you with a new framework, a new understanding, a new language, a new way of telling truth at a deeper level, because we believe that if you have a perfect ability to tell truth, and I'm not talking about a subjective truth, I'm talking about sort of inalienable truths. If you have a perfect ability in your mind, in your emotions, and in your body senses to tell the truth, where those three things are aligned and all telling you the same truth, we don't believe that you can be suffering. We don't believe that you can be in chronic states of pain. We don't believe that you'll have repetitive patterns of pain, which is the most really debilitating type of pain. It's those repetitive patterns of pain that have us start to throw our hands in the air and give up and say, oh, this is just broken. This is not fixable. I'm broken. I'm not fixable. He's broken. He's not fixable, because we've been through this again and again and again and again. So this now, here's the problem. This now must be some sort of a biological thing. This is a genetic proclivity or predisposition. This is a personality trait. This is imbued into the character of this person or myself, this flaw. And so now the modern world goes, well, what do you do about this brokenness? Well, now I need meds. Now I need meds. I need to be fixed, because I can't fix myself. This has been going on so long, so I just must be broken up here somehow.
And so with what we're talking about with hover parenting and the fear of failure, getting to the deepest level and finding out where the fear of failure comes from, where it happened in your life, being really truthful about it, finding out the story behind the story, finding out where the fear of failure comes from, allows you to not only rewire your brain out of hover parenting, but it may allow you to, rewire your brain out of overwhelm, out of stress, out of victimhood, out of feelings, having bad relationships, bad job problems, those types of things. It getting to deeper truths actually allows you to rewire your brain out of many addictions at the same time, is what I found.
That's right. So what's actually happening in the brain is every sort of addiction or every dysfunctional pattern has these associations. And these associations actually give you biochemical rewards. There's these payoffs. Now, they might be painful payoffs for these associations, but for you actually to mute those triggers or break down that associative neural network in the brain, the truth, what it does, it's almost like an antibody. It's almost like taking antibiotics for your body, right? So you have these pathogens in your body and these antibiotics get rid of them. Well, a truth antibiotic is a little bit different. What it does is it just creates new attachments, new associations in that associative neural network. And when you have new associations connected to the truth, if they're deep enough, if they're powerful enough, if they're profound enough, then what it'll actually do is maybe in a singular moment, it'll break down that whole dysfunctional belief system and all the dysfunctional emotions that support that belief system. This is why truth matters so much, because we actually go to the belief system, the core belief system, and we don't have to try and then change your behavior. We don't have to try and change the outcome. We just change the belief system.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's so critical to have a willingness to change those belief systems. And then you can mute any process. Now, if you go through some sort of a trauma, some sort of a rock bottom experience, because that repetitious pain happens again and again and again related to your hover parenting, something now happens in a way where you're seeing your kid go through pain over and over and over, and you can now recognize it's simply because they lack resilience. They have no resilience, no confidence. And now you can attribute a part of that, if not a large part of that, to the way that you're overprotecting, overparenting. That wake-up call for you is the beginning of the change. Not only will it change the behavioral patterns in this associative neural network in your brain, but believe it or not, it'll start to change the dynamic and also the associative neural network in your child's brain. And that just means that the physiological payoffs, the connectors and the synapses start to break down and create new associations. Mm-hmm. So this may seem unrelated, but the best way to explain that would be this concept that I talk about called spontaneous recovery, because you can actually break down an old pattern in a second if your wake up or your truth is profound enough, it's big enough. That's what we call an epiphany. And if that epiphany is connected to your body in a way where you could never forget it again. A lot of people have little mini epiphanies all the time. It's like, oh, I get it. And then they don't write it down, or it didn't make them cry, or it didn't make them really feel. And then 3 days later, they're like, hey, honey, remember that epiphany I had the other day and I thought it was really important? What was that again? Well, that's not going to change your life. No. Now, maybe that epiphany comes back at some point, but it's sadly, there almost has to be this branding, like epiphany and then pain, ouch. And if the pain's profound enough, it's like, okay, now it's so profound, you feel it in the body, and automatically your behavior is going to change around it because you got it on that deep of a level. Explaining this sort of spontaneous recovery, how we can change our brain in an instant. You got to understand the concept that if trauma for the worse in a singular moment can change a person for the rest of their life, a single trauma. I was abandoned at school for 3 hours before my mom picked me up. Boom, locked in. And there's a whole physiological process now that starts to create narratives and stories around that one event. Or I was beaten by my uncle. Locked in. You also got to understand that if you can change your brain instantaneously, if it has the capacity to change your physiology, your emotions in a second for the rest of your life for the worse, here's the good news. It can also, in a second, be changed for the better.
Yes.
We can reboot the brain, rewire the brain, and attach it to authentic attachments to truth in a single second. And that'll heal you. So the best way to mute the trigger is to have a truth that's so profound that you can no longer lie, deny, justify, or be deluded or delusional or in denial about any of the things that you've done in the past. You get it in this singular moment. When I was standing in my living room 7 or 8 years ago, I'd already been teaching my model for many, many years. And automatically applying it to myself. I had grown in so many ways. But my biggest addiction, I hadn't uncovered yet. My biggest. And it had affected every part of my life. It was interwoven elaborately through all of these different behaviors that I had adopted and how they affected my children. And in a single moment, I remember just reflecting back on my childhood and how I used to put hearts on all of my notebooks in school. I had to doodle hearts, but inside the heart would be Todd is great, or I love Todd. Todd is great, or I love Todd. Some version of that. Now, again, any astute observer of human behavior would see that as a compensation back then. Not that this is just such a confident kid, but that's a compensation for something, right? And as I started running this back through the filter of my model, I literally hit the floor. I fell to the floor and just started bawling. And in that moment, I realized that I had a more than addiction. I was superior addiction. And it's too complicated to explain right now, but that I had attached to being better than other people. And then I saw how that affected my relationship with my wife for 25 years. And the way, in fact, that me needing to be better unconsciously was always kind of like pushing the thumb in her head, because if I need to be better, well, that means you have to be not as good.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so subtle, because I was so loving and always trying to lift my wife up, but I was trying to lift her up in a way that actually unconsciously made me feel better, because only a better person would be trying to constantly lift somebody up that they loved so much. And then I saw the way that it affected my son and the sports that he played. Not the sports that I was great at that I wanted to teach him, but sports that I had never played. And I saw how it affected my daughter and her perfectionism. And I saw, and like, it was almost like, you know, when they say you die and your life passes before your eyes, and there's this movie. And so it was an undeniable thing for me. I was changed in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I was hurt by and a little bit disgusted by my more than. I was disgusted by it. And whenever I would catch myself with different forms of more than showing up that I didn't see as more thans, and I would discover some new thing, like needing to coach all of my kids' sports. And living vicariously through your kids in a way, realizing that I needed them to do well because it made me feel better about me as a parent. That made me a more than parent. If my kids were super happy, super well balanced, super functional, that made me a more than parent. And I would almost challenge all of you out there that if you asked yourself a question, that if your kid was failing or falling down in some particular area, could you not internalize that and feel like, oh, what did I do wrong?
Mm-hmm.
Am I a bad parent?
Yeah.
Can you actually tell me that you wouldn't internalize it that way? Or somehow they're failing in school, somehow they're challenged in relationships, somehow they're in some chronic pain, somehow they're doing too much drugs and they're lost in some addiction or mental illness or neuroses, and you're not going, oh, what did I do wrong? And that's your fear.
Mm-hmm.
What did I do wrong? How did I blow it? How did I drop the ball? Am I a failure?
Yeah.
I just want to encourage you to not think that being a good parent is the parent that has prevented their children from experiencing pain. That being the good parent is the parent that facilitates opportunities for your children to experience pain, not life and death pain, but pain of all types in their life, and that you're there to guide them to authentic attachment. You're there to help them realize that they can climb those stairs. You're there to help them discover their confidence and resilience. You're there to let them know that this is their journey and they can do it, and that you're there watching from the hammock, and that I've got this. If you need my help, I'm here. And that when they come to you even and go, well, what would you do, Mom? And what would you do, Dad? Instead of solving it for them, even though they asked you, the best thing you can do is to go, you'll get it. You're so smart. You figured out these types of things before. Figure this out on your own. You'll feel better. Or you could go, well, what are your options? What do you think are the two or three best ways to deal with it? Tell me, and then maybe I'll reflect back on what I think your options are in terms of your opinion or perspective. And so then they tell you, well, I was thinking either A or B. And I'd go like, well, either of those sound like a pretty good option. Pick one.
Yeah.
So give the power back to your kids. That's good parenting. Let them hurt. Let them fall down. Let them discover their way out.
Exactly. And so the best thing about the neural alignment model is that you don't have to have those bam epiphanies in order to rewire your brain. That's why you and I created the neural alignment model workbooks, because the other way to rewire your brain is through repetition. And that's what our workbooks do. We take you through a series of 4 different types of kind of behavioral predictors, things that might come up for you as a hover parent. And we run through examples, and there's space to fill it. We give you ideas, and then there's space to fill out your own answers and what's actually going on in your life. And there's example after example after example after example, because when you do enough repetition, you rewire the synapses. And so that's why our workbooks are so powerful, because the first time you hear new information or do new information or take it in, your subconscious blocks it because it's considered foreign. And so what happens is you need to repetition again and again and again for your subconscious to actually take in the information, not kick it out as foreign, and to truly integrate it and to be able to change your life. So yes, you can get out of hover parenting. You can tackle the addictive persona of I'm a failure. I'm going to be a failure. I'm going to fail. And so that's why Todd and I are here to help you overcome the deeper underlying fear of hover parenting, which is the fear of failure, the fear in general of so many things. So Todd and I are both available for coaching sessions. We are available to help you overcome any addictive or dysfunctional pattern that you have in your life. And the Hover Parenting Workbook is now up on the website for you to purchase and to be able to start working through the hover parenting dysfunctional patterns that are hurting you and your child and society in general. So share these videos with your friends, share the workbook with your friends, and let them know that school's just getting into session for people in the United States, and in Canada, we're gearing up for our kids to go back to school. And that's when hover parenting is really going to kick in, isn't it, Todd?
Yeah, it really is. And there's different times when it really gets activated. But, you know, if I could leave you with just one little thing, and that is, you know, in everything, if I'm working with couples about relationships, I tell them, don't need each other. Love each other, want each other, desire each other, respect each other, appreciate each other. Don't need each other, because then you start to create these dynamics. Well, once you need somebody, then you need them to be a certain way, then you start to control them. Well, I would say the same thing with parenting. Don't need to be the perfect parent. Doesn't exist. Be vigilant, be loving, be open, be compassionate. Yes, be a good parent and put effort into being a good parent. Once you need to be a great parent, once you need to see you're actually doing it for you and not for your kid, that's the qualifier for hover parenting in a way that becomes unproductive, hurtful, and creates these negative dynamics. Is because you need them to be a certain way so that you're seen a certain way.
Well, and the other thing that's really important is to realize it's a journey. Just because you're a parent does not mean you quit learning. It's a lifelong journey of you learning and uncovering more truths within yourself and your child uncovering their truths, you know, breaking down, you know, pseudo attachments for both of you. So it's a learning journey as you go along for everyone. So when you hit parent, it doesn't mean you made it and there's nothing else to learn. It's all a learning expedition.
Speaking about learning, Lisa's teaching me. By the way, guys, if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe below. And you can hit the little bell too, so it'll give you your reminders.
That's right. Exactly. So join our Facebook page, Neural Alignment Model. Join our Neural Alignment Model Facebook group. We have great discussions in there, lots of information, lots of extra videos that you haven't seen before. And if you're interested in our courses or classes or coaching, you can go to the neuralalignmentmodel.com. Thank you so much for this session, Todd. This has been so wide open, so much information that has brought so many moments to me as well. I'm still learning as a parent, and thank you so much, and we will see you in the next video.
My pleasure. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.